Gilbert or Kristen, please, um, in the Cliff's notes for folks at home, um, to briefly address some of the key points in the development of the discussion of race in schools, in specifically in American schools, to kind of unpack a little bit of that, because I feel like we come crashing into this conversation as public discourse, and the context of so many pieces may fly right past us. So maybe we should have done that earlier, but I feel like it's pertinent now. So we could either go to the question or we could.
No, let's do it. Let's talk a little history. Let's get a little history on the table.
So discussion of race, I think can be used in a way that how feminists have been talking about women's experiences, where they made an argument that women are either systematically excluded or systematically included. Either way, it serves the benefit of the men. If I use that word, it is clear that historically we did not talk about race because they're excluded. By not talking about it, race became invisible. Race became normal as the white race. And what gets interesting is that, so the systematic exclusion is the attempt to rid of any mentioning of race that serves to normalize white experiences, thereby abnormalizing people of color. And then when it's included, that is systematic inclusion, it is told from and for the benefits of the dominant group that is white. And the race is often presented in a binary way as black or white or black. In the process, the persons of color who are not black became abnormalized and further marginalized and invalidated. Other times, race is when it's included, it is often conflated with the terms like culture and tradition, where focus on the differences, and then without any discussion of the power relations that these differences are embedded on. And this gives the idea that race does not affect people. People are just black or white, and they're just happy where they are. And other times, when race is discussed, is presented beyond this mere cultural differences, it is done in a way that is thing of the past, talking about the slavery that took so long ago. That it suggests that the idea of this racial issue does not exist anymore because we as a society and nation have overcome this. What it does is it invalidates the claims of racism, like we have seen with the Black Lives Matter movement. When the effects of race are mentioned, it is often presented as an individual racism, that was a horrible individual, that we deal with that individual. In the process, the systematic issues, institutional problems do not get discussed whatsoever. And we assume that, we could overcome this race by encouraging people through education, opening minds, or changing our behaviors, like SEO as an example. This leaves the institutional biases unchallenged. And we also see times when race is represented, is presented in the same way how other isms like sexism, classism, heterosexism are presented, as if these are the same thing. In the process, it normalizes racism as part of our community, our society, as if that is something that we just have to overcome. It's just there. And also what it does is that it pits one marginalized group against each other for validation, where we have people of color pitted against women, historically anyway, and then women pitted against the LGBTQ plus community, and then the people with special needs. So what happens is that when it's included, it serves the benefit of the dominant group because they control how it is presented or not presented. There are educators use the discussion of race that relates to the lives of the students in schools to promote critical thinking, to challenge this inequality and systematic issues. And these are the people who find things critical race theory to be a very useful tool.
If I can jump into, I think just to build on everything that Gilbert said, I think, there have certainly been more organizations recently popping up talking about how we need to talk about race in schools and how to talk about race in schools. So I'm sure part of the backlash is also just, like I saw this meme the other day, and it was taking a picture from Arkansas, and it was like the grandparents who didn't want to integrate schools are the same people who, are now the people who didn't want to integrate schools, they are now the grandparents who don't want their children to learn about racism now, right? So I think part of this, like, there are efforts to challenge the curriculum because of the things that Gilbert has said, right? And there have been conversations, and like there have been, like, Black Lives Matter week at school and things that are looking at race in much more honest ways and calling for teaching of hard history, right? And there's the 1619 curriculum that has come out and has also, I think, spurred some of this backlash, right? Because it's saying, like, we need to take an honest look at our history. And I think Jim Williams from the Muncie Board of Education, like, I don't know if anyone saw his speech to the board recently, but he was talking about, like, we need to look at these things honestly, right? Like, we can look at the brilliance of the Declaration of Independence and also critique the authors of it and why, right? Like, we can look at Andrew Jackson, his presidency, and also look at the Trail of Tears and the way in which he treated Indigenous people, like, and how we can complicate these things and kids can handle that. But I think we're at a point where there are folks calling for a rethinking of how race is being taught because of the very things that Gilbert has said. And I think that's also pushed the backlash, which has fallen under the bracket of CRT, right? It's sort of like any talking about race, period, has now been associated with CRT. And that's a real problem.
Well, I do think this kind of dovetails still nicely with one of the questions we received. And this question says, this person asks a question and said, I question the strategy of engaging the purple people on the issue of CRT by denying that's being taught in schools because it's too theoretical, which it might seem like we've been doing. Why not own the prioritization of a critical consciousness as a worthwhile quality to develop in the citizens of democracy? Why reserve a consciousness of structural racism for those who pursue a secondary education? And I'm not saying that this is something that you folks said, but I can think of how there might have been moments in which we were talking that it seemed like we were doing that. And so I wonder how you would respond to this person, either Gilbert or Kristen, whoever wants to take it first.
If I go first, to me, oh no, sorry, I'm muting myself. To me, the critical race theory, as I said earlier, is something that a tool to analyze the world around us through the lens of race, right? If you go with the very, very basic definition, a lot of things can be critical race theory, isn't it? It just so happens that the way it's been used and way it's been advocated has mostly been in academic circle. It has not been made its move into schools yet. And that's why I think what Kristen said, that it's not in school. It really isn't. Well, people may be doing those work, but they will not call it critical race theory, right? So other aspect of it is that the power of naming comes here as well too, is that the critical race theory name itself became hijacked by these people who don't really understand it. And they're putting other meanings to it. Now, when we do the stuff by bringing race to the forefront of race, we have to be careful about what we mean by CRT, because now the name has been hijacked. So I think it's a little bit more complicated. What do you think, Christine?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, I think both Gilbert and I would say here that yes, claiming teaching, nurturing children's critical consciousness is something that schools absolutely should do, and helping children hone their tools to critique systems of power and privilege is something we would love teachers to do more of, right? So I think it's less that, sort of seeding CRT in a way that's saying I think kids can handle it. We're not saying kids can't handle it or saying that it shouldn't be taught. I think, like Gilbert said, one, the way it's traditionally been structured, it's not being taught. And two, it's because it's been taken over and taken away, I think it's difficult to sort of just reclaim back and wait and say, no, like, we're taking CRT back because it's us. I mean, I think we can say the values that are embedded and part of CRT are things that we absolutely would support and encourage as part of being a democratic citizen. But like Gilbert said, I think it is much more complicated than just saying like, no, CRT is ours and we want it back.
There's a conversation about this going on in the chat right now, whether it needs new branding or whether that's not the issue. And where I'm feeling really anxious and depressed lately is about how much headway they're making. So I went and I've been spending a lot of time last couple of days online looking at all the groups, and there are a lot in Indiana. And a lot of them have, pretty innocuous sounding names like Unify Westfield and Unify Carmel. And that seems like, oh, why wouldn't you want to do that? Unify the people in your community. And there's a lot of energy behind all of them. And they, we have this moment. So Representative Sue Arrington visited and talked to some school students this week at Muncie Central High School. And she said to them, watch out for this next legislative session. Watch for anti-CRT laws. And that is on the horizon in Indiana, given given the constitution of our state legislature. And so what I'm just feeling anxious about is how we push back upon this, because we can't just do it by, debating whether we want to use this term still or something to this effect. And if and something that Phil was talking about earlier, if we've ceded too much ground already, I'm just feeling a little bit nervous and discouraged. And I guess there might not be a real question there, but if either of you wants to speak to my anxieties.
Sarah, I totally empathize with the anxiety. And then India is one of 20-some states who are trying to put CRT into law, saying we cannot do that, right? So I really understand that, empathize with you. At the same time, as a person of color, things like this happen every day. So as an example, so I drive to West Lafayette because my kid goes there at school. And I drive through the town, 26 and 28. All these small towns I pass by, every single one of them used to be sundown town. Do you think I'll feel safe about pulling over a gas station to fill in the gas? I really don't. So I make sure I fill in the gas before I leave Muncie, and I fill it up when I get over West Lafayette. So it doesn't really surprise me that those stuff are there. What does surprise me that some people are so emboldened to bring to the forefront, because there was time that it was not cool to say those things, right?
Yeah, I read one article recently about one of the people in the Arizona group who talked about our European American legacy, and that just smacks of white supremacy. That's Nazi language, talking about European American, and that just somebody would give that to a reporter. So I think that emboldened sense of people. And you're right to point out that for people of color in the United States, this has always been something to navigate. And I think that for some of us, people like me, this is kind of coming to the fore now in a way that it hasn't before. So thank you for that.